to another episode of Unblockable. My name is Edward Hickman. I have Nicholas Black here with me. Thank you for allowing me to continue the theme of having Harry Potter sounding guests on my show. I have Harry Halpin and Nicholas Black. You guys sound like you're starting another Hogwarts. It's pretty awesome. Always excited to meet another crypto enthusiast. You seem to have a long history of tracking these markets, and I think that's a really valuable thing to do. I don't think most people realize these markets haven't been around that long. So people who have been watching them since the inception have a great deal of information and knowledge that's worth listening to. So I applaud the fact that you're creating so much content and that you're out there sharing that information with people, because it's usually valuable. So we really need to support content generators and really just be open to having these dialogues and listen in on what other people are saying, because I think collectively the amount of information that's coming out about our industry is really valuable. And that doesn't come from one central source by design, right? And I applaud you for being one of those sources of information. And if there's anything you want to share with anyone who might be listening, and I think now is a great time, if there's anything that's exciting for you right now or anything that you're working on, I'd love to hear about it.
Pretty much right now, I'm just trying to manage clients' money safely. So I came from the gold business, and I probably was in the gold business 8 or 9 years. I ended up going in as a security consultant for a refinery. A buddy of mine was like, hey, if you were going to break this refinery, like, how would you do it? How would you bankrupt us? And how would you rob us? I was like, okay, that's cool. So I have a background in security consulting. So I went, and the more I kind of looked at this facility over a few weeks doing a feasibility study, I was like, this is a really cool industry. And then the gold started coming in on UPS trucks and Brinks and all that. And I was like, wow, that's like actual money. And they're like, hey, we got to go to Taco Bell to do a deal. I'm like, okay. We show up, and these guys have, $2 or $3 million worth of, milli diamonds. And they're like, I'm like, what is this? Like, this is the craziest thing, but this is real. So I started getting an understanding for what real money, sound money, good money, bad money, fiat current. And that started to all make sense. And then they brought me into the refinery. I learned everything from smelting, refining, doing the assays, chemical refining, all the way up to selling futures against the gold that we were holding. Wonderful. So like a refinery, you might go and sell to a cash for gold place or a pawn shop. They are all cash poor. So they're flipping everything they can as quick as possible, right? And they need that money. And so like if you're a cash for gold place, even some of the big ones that look really established, if they spend $100,000 on a Monday, they're broke, right?
Got it.
They're just broke. And so because they can't go in the hole for more than 2 or 3 days, otherwise they're 300,000-400,000 in the hole, and they can't meet that. So they ship to us usually as fast as possible. Every night we'll get a Brinks in the morning, or sometimes UPS, but a Brinks or a FedEx with everything they've got, and we'll melt it and have them wired within an hour or two.
Wow.
So that they can stay in the business.
So did that make you a gold bug seeing all this? Just really like, it bit you, huh?
Just understanding.
And just for frame of reference, when is all this happening? Like how long ago were we talking?
So this is probably 2007, 8, 9,
so
right?
Around the crash time. Good time to be getting in gold, right?
Yeah, and just understanding, like kind of what's going on. And I didn't, at that time, I was in the stock market, like an idiot, but I didn't understand. I certainly didn't understand the MBS market or what the Fed did or didn't do. I just had there's no reason for me to have exposure to that.
Yeah, most of us didn't.
But then getting into the gold business and gold, is kind of a colloquialism for gold, platinum, palladium, rhodium, ruthenium, all the
precious metals,
precious metal in general, silver, and some semi-precious depending on how often we get it, and diamonds.
The shiny stuff.
Awesome.
Right?
Because the big part of the precious metals business that people don't talk about is diamonds. When we melt all your gold, like Walmart sends us tons and tons of gold, they don't ask for their little milli stones back, which one by one don't make a difference. But if you have 2 or 3 or 4,000 carats, then you can make a market. Fantastic. And so that's kind of one of the byproducts of the refining industry, if you're a final, like an end refiner. So anyway, just kind of learning all of this. And then my partner and I start looking at Bitcoin, and like, that's kind of cool.
What year is this?
Nerd money. So we're like 2012. Okay. And my brother's been a miner, by the way. So he started mining at 2011. And he's been mining and right. Yeah. And he's like, you got to check it out. And I'm like,
It's most people's reaction.
When I
right?
If I can use it on eBay, I'll buy it.
Got it.
And that we didn't hit that date. Yep. And so I kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And then I started talking to a Fed deputy governor of Kansas City Fed. He was kind of a mentor to one of my business partners. So he said, hey, talk to this guy. he has a really interesting perspective. So I started kind of mentoring with that guy and just kind of gleaning knowledge and trying to understand what the Fed was or wasn't.
Scary. That's a scary realization in a moment. That's a really hallmark moment in a adult's life, right? We realize, wait a minute, this system that I've been in,
it's all nonsense.
It's been organized in such a way that really isn't going to create the kind of outcomes I want for my life or my civilization. And I think a lot of us intuitively understand that, but to come to the realization and see the nuts and bolts and see the way the money supply works or money creation happens in the society and how ultimately it really comes down to the choice of a very small insular group. That's a scary moment in a person's life,
Yeah.
right? Oh, whoa, what do I do about this seemingly intractable problem? And I had that crisis of conscience in 2007, 2008. I was working in financial services when the whole industry tipped over. And up until that point, it took me everything I could just to get on my feet, get my career going. I was in my early 20s. I was like, okay, this is great. Finally working in finance, life is going good. And then the largest collapse in economic human history happened.
Yeah.
And then, when things are going good, you feel like a genius, right? Like I got everything figured out. But when things go bad, suddenly you blame yourself. But the truth is neither is true. It's the system. It's the economic system you're in. And coming to grips with the fundamental way in which our system has been designed and seeing the way in which it's extracting productivity from the entire populace for all of our lives since before we were born, and how that doesn't create favorable outcomes, or at least outcomes that we can identify with.
Right.
And I think having that moment of realization, for the most part, when you have it, it's depressing. It's like it's something you're helpless against. But now that non-national digital money is a product, suddenly there's this door that's emerged. And I'm really excited to see what's on the other side of that door. And I think as a civilization and as a market, we're kind of figuring that out right now. We're in that stage where we haven't made it to the other side of the door, but we could see it. Right, we could describe it even, and most of these projects I think are trying to describe that door. They're saying like, this is what I think the future looks like. This is the kind of platform that's necessary for us to make the jump. But go on, you got into crypto. Your brother was a miner. Things are going good, right?
So
you got some mentoring. You had the realization.
it finally, dawned on me that I should start taking some kind of closer interest in it. And when I understood more about the Fed, then I understood more of their inability to do anything and how monetary policy is all a joke. It doesn't exist. It's never existed. It's all just a facade. Yeah. So I was like, okay, cool. I don't have to worry about monetary policy because it has really muted effects. I only have to worry about the psychology of the masses. That's a lot easier. Yeah. Right? People behave on a chart the way they behave.
Yeah, we think we're fancy. We think we're very complicated, but anyone who's behaviorist will tell you otherwise.
That's right. If you
I was raised by a behavioral psychologist. He dispelled all those ideas very early on. It's like, no, we're pretty much just meat bag that you could program, right?
Yeah.
We're not very special, unique snowflakes. We're more alike than we are different. And
TA doesn't always work in crypto. It doesn't work in crypto, but it definitely works on humans.
Yes. Yeah.
And as long as you get the human side of it, the rest of it just happens. So that kind of pushed me into crypto. I started dipping my toe 2014, 2015. And of course, anybody with any amount of money in those years that didn't sell got good. Yeah. And so then I was to the point where I was like, oh, I don't have to do nothing now. So what do I want to do with my nothing? So I came out to LA to be a writer. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go out and just write some stuff and sell it because it's that easy.
Yeah.
So I came out, I spent some time mentoring with some different guys. I was still in finance because I was consulting a lot for the gold side. So I do consult small and mid-sized refineries, and I consult people hedging. And I just kind of work with them, like, how do you hedge your gold? Are you guys going 100 ounce by 100 or like,
gold is such a whole universe. People don't realize it's just like markets within markets within markets.
Yeah, and it's such a tiny margin business, right? Like a refinery that they're making 1 to 1.5% on gold before they flip it. That's not much. And if you get it wrong, you get blown up. So we were always looking for ways you could add some premium to that, whether it's minting bullion coins, just whatever. Anyway, so I kind of took that with me into the crypto space. I invested in a small startup, which is actually doing really well, but they weren't for a while. They were on life support. So I went out and kind of just lived with them. And it was really cool being in a hacker house in the Bay Area. And we went to a hackathon and we built, I was just standing there. They built.
You supported, right? Moral support.
It's we. They built a crypto exchange. And then what I said is, why don't we, as part of our hackathon experiment, wrap all this up in an ETF?
Wonderful.
So we did the basics of an ETF, but it was a bigger product, and it had about I think at that time like 12 or 15 assets in it. Just straight down the list, the top 12.
Yeah, nice.
And I said, cool, you got some exposure.
Index funds. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right. Yeah, and we know passive indexation.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, so that was our project. 3 days later, MT Gox.
Got it.
And then everybody's like,
you took one in the chest.
Well, we were all pretty nervous, and it didn't dawn on us. Of course, at that time, you're not thinking, well, Bitcoin's going to go to 20,000 or 100,000, because all of Plan B's work, which is really good work, by the way, all the stock to flow stuff, it hadn't really played out. It still hasn't played out yet. It's still a lot of speculation and whimsy.
It works until it doesn't.
It works.
A model is good until it's not.
That's right. And as long as you put the time horizon far enough out, you can always say we're almost there.
Yeah. Someday, somehow, somewhere.
We'll get there, right? And then you have the Max Kaisers and all that. So, and that's fine. And so what I said was, okay, if I'm going to be in this space at all, I'm not going to be in any camp. No pom-poms, none of that.
Maximalism for you?
Nothing.
Great.
No.
Great.
And so like if someone's like, should I buy Bitcoin? Yeah, but just understand that in 3 or 4 years, the Chinese are going to double spend it and crush it to dust because they have their own central asset.
Understand that there are some attack vectors here. There are some risks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, big ones. And so my, game theory is kind of my underlying thesis for everything, critical thinking and game theory.
Wonderful.
Because if you have that, everything makes sense. You don't really need to even, as long as you know the rules.
People do what's in their best interest, right? The incentive model will determine the outcomes you get in any system.
Yes.
I think that's the area that I think our industry needs the most innovation. It's the area that I spent most of my time focusing on. Like, what's the incentive model when I use the system? Like, what happens when I give it my inputs?
Yep.
Right? Do I benefit? Does that person over there benefit? Maybe the larger pool benefit? Cool. Now we're on to something. And I think right now we have really inelegant systems design when it comes to that issue, specifically around the inflation and distribution policies of all major cryptocurrencies. If you look at them, they're pretty much the same. It's all infrastructure spending, right? All new units of account go to maintaining the infrastructure, which I akin to building a civilization that only invests in roads. You'd have really amazing roads, but the rest of civilization would be kind of shoddy. So
we can't afford cars, but we got roads.
Yeah. So it's kind of the situation we're in now, where we have these really nice roads, like really secure roads. God, Bitcoin's super secure, right? Like cracking that's going to be really hard right now, but it doesn't really do much else. And what I want to do is create ecosystems that have more elegant inflation and distribution policies, specifically tagged to a fluid democracy, a fluid governance system, where the users of the systems are deciding on some of the metrics in real time. Right. And we're still working out the parameters of what that looks like, but I have the module built. I could take a delegated proof of stake system, launch it into an ecosystem, and let the user base choose like the inflation or distribution policy in real time.
Right.
And what I'm hoping we'll see are ethos-led ecosystems, where you'll have like a cryptocurrency where the population has said, well, 10% of everything we make is going to go towards solving this problem. Like 10% of every transaction fee, of every new dollar created, of everything, is going to go towards removing all the plastic from the Pacific Gyre, right? And now suddenly you have this ethos-led economy where people could participate and do what we normally do, and yet part of it is going to solve a problem we all believe in. And I think that we're going to see a whole phase of that, of these kind of like really well-branded, ethos-led ecosystems. And I'm one of them. I'm guilty as charged, right? But I think there's going to be a whole swath of those, and I'm really looking forward to seeing those emerge. I think we're still in the prototype phase, but really fascinating prototypes, right? Ethereum is wildly useful. I know you're a Cardano guy. Like I've been in Cardano since day one too. Like I think they're doing really great work over there, and I really look forward to seeing where they go next. But is there anything else that's exciting to you? Or what's the new crop that has you excited?
That's the problem.
You're only about the old, like, sort of blue chip.
No, I look all over the place. I mean, I'm constantly looking and reading and looking at white papers and stuff. And, with this big DeFi craze, which is nothing about DeFi right now is DeFi. None of this is decentralized finance. Got it. Right. This is all yield farming. And none of the yield farming is really yield farming. It's all arbitraging stable coins.
Got it.
With a daisy chain of smart contracts that you can, butcher. Yeah. With very little effort. And so there's going to be a lot of people get punished in this space, rushing in to get these yields that deteriorate in days. I mean, I don't know if you watched Yearn when they did the wrapped Ethereum.
I saw the headline, 1,000,000% increase, something or whatever.
6.
Yeah. Got it.
4 days later, 6% or 8%.
We're having another one of those phases of the market where there's like this new technology piece, there's this new mechanism through which you could accumulate capital, and of course people are gaming it instantly, right? And we could debate about what that even means. Like Sushi Swap is trying to defend their position, saying like, "Hey, look, we earned it. We made this thing," and they're like, "Did you though?"
They kind of earn nothing. They're a vampire.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not doing anything productive. They haven't added anything in terms of
Right.
innovation or brought value to the marketplace. What they did was clone an existing thing,
Right.
catch in on a trend, and then perhaps just choose a bad time to leave. I felt like it was just irresponsible. Like, we could say that she deserves to be compensated or rewarded for the efforts and for what she risked.
The chef,
Or the chef. I'm saying she just out of politeness,
to
right?
be safe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But whether or not they managed what they did properly, I mean, even in their own best interest, I would imagine that you'd make much more money if you took your cryptocurrency, this thing you launched, into the ecosystem very seriously and supported it and decided that, like, yeah, we're launching a platform and we understand that it's just a copy of Uniswap and all that stuff, but we're different because of whatever your competitive advantage is, and really get behind that and believe in it. I think that's a market opportunity, and the amount of money that person could have made long term greatly succeeds whatever they just pulled out right now.
I think 13 million at current value.
Yeah, I think our whole market is subject to short-term thinking, right? Every time there's a short downturn or an upswing, like I said, everyone's a genius or a complete idiot, right? They don't really recognize that that's just the nature of the market. And it's not that you're smart or stupid. It's just that these markets are still forming. They're still kind of in their infancy, and they're splashing around. And, even right now, it's an exciting day, right? Like the markets are finally trending in the right direction. And I mean, but for you, who's doing serious technical analysis, it seems like, what are the kind of metrics that you look at? Like, what are your favorite metrics? I mean, we talked about human psychology, but what are the other things you need to keep an eyeball on?
I do. I go back to I start with a team.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter how fast the horse is if the jockey sucks.
Got it.
So you look at the team in the whole space. What are there 3 people you really trust? Probably Charles Hoskinson.
Yep.
He's just and again, if he gets derailed, I'll be the first to call him out.
Mhm.
But
so far, so good.
Over time, so far, so good.
Yeah.
And he was probably the backbone to Ethereum from the beginning.
Arguably, and that truth will be weighted out in the market as
We'll see it.
Cardano.
Yep.
If it rises above Ethereum, we'll recognize that was probably the truth all along. Yeah.
I do think we're going to see a big clash of the titans between all these DApp platforms come Q1, Q2 of 2021, when everybody has all of their assets, when Plutus and Marlowe and all these rollouts, when Ethereum 2.0.0.0.0.0.1 launches, and a lot of people are under the assumption that 2.0 is going to be this massive shift. They don't realize this is an iterative process that's going to take years.
Got it.
They're not going to be competitive.
You think they're moving too slow in an industry like ours?
Well, I think they're moving.
Ossification is dangerous.
Near term too fast, but long term they move too slow. There's a saying in software: you always overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate what you can accomplish in 5 years.
Got it.
Because technology improves, chips get smaller, and things like that. But your team, that's kind of a constant. Well, when you're worth $500 million like Vitalik and these other guys, maybe you have not as much give a shit in the tank every morning when you wake up.
I think that's the crux of the matter here. I think you hit on it, because I made a lot of money on the market during the ICO phase. I put my entire livelihood into every token sale I could see. I participated in 60 of them, right? Big money. Great for me, right? Now, what have you delivered? You took the money. We're seeing these 9-figure, token sales that then go up because the market's still trending upwards, right? And what they release is barely a graphical user interface that's talking to a chain that allows me to do transactions on occasion, but nothing else. It's like, okay, you got your network up, you did mainnet launch, good for you, right? You're running an Amazon web server probably somewhere with a node on it, right? Big accomplishment with that $125 million.
Right.
Where's the meat? Where's the product? Where's the thing that's changing the world? Where's the thing that is banking the unbanked, getting people access, or just driving real utility back to the end user? And it just wasn't there. So I switched from HODL strategy to Bibble. And I just took all the money that I made in these markets and invested it in a company and just started my own company. And I'm really fortunate in that I'm surrounded by a bunch of people who are a lot smarter than me in different disciplines that I need expertise in to be successful. But that's exactly the team I got. They just were waiting for me. It's all my friends, people I grew up with who've been running companies their whole lives. I even hired my own business mentor, someone who was running a company when I met him, and I learned software development simply by following him around like a lost puppy. He works for me now, right? So why would I want to waste that 30 plus years of software development, right? So I'm in an interesting situation where I'm like the youngest person in my company. Everyone else has gray hair and is very experienced. And they're all highly motivated because they could see in code that my intentions are clear, that I'm creating a system that ultimately has a positive feedback loop with the end user.
Right.
Where if economic activity is great enough, where each user is making $2 or more a day, you could solve poverty permanently. And I mean that authentically. And I've shown it to experts and said, this is my model, my inflation and distribution policy based off of the economic activity of what I call an information age economy. If these inputs are great enough, and I can feed many inputs into it, it doesn't have to come from one network, but if the inputs are great enough, you can solve poverty, right? As long as you have a digital personhood system on the other side, which I've developed, and as long as you can prove actual like personhood, what they call aliveness, like that's a real person, which I can, the technology exists. I could build a self-governing economy where the money is going back to the people that are governing themselves. And I've already designed all that. That's actually what's launching October 1st. I spent a couple $1 million at this point of my own money and investors' money. And we built this, somewhat cantankerous, gaudy thing of a company to launch this thing. And it's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful experience. And we're timing it just right. I think that 4-year market cycle with Bitcoin creates these windows of opportunity in which if you're deploying with the right amount of patience and with a quality offering, we're seeing this thing return to where like white papers are emerging and people are getting $20 million again. And that's all well and good. And I wish them all the luck in the world. But I think we need to see a flight to quality in our market. I think we need to start looking at serious projects with serious intentions that also have at least decent backing, at least to show that there's like some weight behind it. And that's what I've done. I've been able to accumulate that for my organization. And I really hope to see other organizations as they enter our marketplace, put in the time and energy to build the thing that they're talking about before you release it and start selling tokens. And I think that gives us a lot of regulatory coverage. We're not asking you for money so I could build it. I've built it and I'm selling you a product. Right?
Go use it.
Yeah, there's a service out here that I've deployed that lives on a decentralized autonomous organization. I don't control the service. I have the keys to access that service, which I'm willing to sell you, right? And there's a market price for that, and there's real utility. I think the utility lesson is something that our industry overlooks every step of the way. M-Pesa is telling us everything we need to know, that if you have a digital currency, backing it with an intangible digital good or service that you could deliver anywhere at near zero marginal cost is the way forward. It's how you unlock value for people in an egalitarian platform versus, I like gold, love gold, right? But if you make a token that's redeemable for gold, I need to be able to actually redeem it somewhere, somehow, right? And
that nexus to the real world's problematic.
Yeah, if I'm in Kenya and there's just no redemption center nearby and I can't actually do any redemption online because I can't have a wire transfer come into Kenya after I liquidated on the other side, I'm in a silo, right? And I want to remove those silos. And I think the best way to do so is to start backing our currency on data and information, specifically data and information-based services like advertising. If the currency you're using is backed by a service that is worth more than oil now, right? Data and information as an asset is worth more than oil.
Right.
Well, we built our entire civilization backing the US dollar on oil for the past couple decades, right? Why not back it by information? The important key here is that who owns data and information at the point of creation? We do. It's our data and information, our attention, it's our engagement, right? So what I want to do is shift the paradigm so that we recognize that first fundamentally, like it's my data, my information, my profile, my transaction information, all that stuff. If you would like to access it or utilize it in any way, I would like to be in partnership with you. And when you monetize that and make money, please include me.
Right.
Right. And I've already set all that up, series of smart contracts, automatic distribution. I call it an economic torus. There's a master contract sits on top that accumulates all the funds, transaction fees, a portion of the inflation and distribution policy where the other portion goes to the miners. You still got to incentivize that,
right?
But it represents a really steady curve versus this variable of having miners trying to game the system to have higher transaction fees.
Well,
right?
they'll always game. That's Ethereum's problem. They're stuck there right now.
Yeah, I removed that attack vector. Miners don't get transaction fees. The community gets transaction fees. The miners get a portion of the economy that is steady and reliable and measurable.
Right.
You can build your whole business model around it and know exactly how much you could devote to this and still turn a profit. Once you've removed that factor, I think things get really interesting. The problem with delegated proof of stake systems, of course, are the cartel issue, where you get one or two nodes that have all the votes, right? And so
they get in cahoots.
Yeah. So I've actually worked around that by creating a flat system. Delegators are chosen heuristically. If you just have the best qualities, like you have the best uptime, behaving the best, don't do anything disruptive, don't do anything that gets you slashed, then you're in, right? There's no other heuristic necessary to consider. So anyone who's in the major pool gets exactly the same portion of the vote. So as a user, I don't delegate to some random stranger I've never met. I put my money into a single delegation account that goes to all of them simultaneously, right? So no more cartels that way. And if you solve the cartel problem of delegated proof of stake, you've solved the central sort of like argument people have with it. Beyond that, the performance characteristics are wonderful. We're much faster than anything else that's in like the top 20 right now, right? And we're built using the Cosmos software development kit. So most of what you could say about Cosmos, you could say about our network architecture. And that's exciting for us because they're all about interoperability, right? We're going to see these wrap tokens, which are really exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing Cosmos wrap tokens, which I'm sure are going to happen. But what I'm really looking forward to seeing is the interoperability protocol finish, and we start to see these chains talk to each other. I know there's lots of other organizations working on it, and I think they're all going to work. I think any interoperability is still interoperability, right? And that's the area that really excites me for the next market cycle. So if someone's asked a question like, what do you see coming? I think interoperability is still the sort of theme of this market cycle and the most important thing, because organizations that become interoperable, that have meaningful attachments to the other networks, like my network will have a wrapped Anatha, that's the name of the token, gateway with the Ethereum ecosystem that lives on chain. It's the network that's doing the swap. It's not us. It's not any third party. It's the network. And I think that level of interoperability where the networks can talk to each other natively is a really big deal. And I think organizations that don't do that are going to get left in the dust. I think they're going to be stuck out competing by themselves. And there's going to be this larger pool of organizations that get together and cooperate and prevent a united front against the old world. That's the one that excites me. That's the team I want to be on. Right? Let's get in that pool, right? So I spent most of my career like in crypto just focusing on that, on interoperability, on this idea that we're not competing with each other, but rather we're competing with the old system. It's legacy financial system versus information age system, right? It's not Ethereum versus Bitcoin or whatever camp you believe you belong to, right? I see it as this larger meta pool, but I'm Buddhist, so that's my nature, right?
Yeah. So I guess I'm kind of in your camp. What I think happening is you have all these projects, and when they start utilizing other platforms to wrap and, to incentivize their own communities, then their communities have to ask, should I be in this project if they're just wrapping? So for instance, all the companies that leverage Cardano, why would you use them the second they start leveraging Cardano? Just go. Yeah. Everybody that's working with Filecoin, right? It's one I'm pretty excited about, Yeah,
we have the same filmmaker, Ben Henredick, my close friend. He makes all the Filecoin videos. He's making mine too.
Yeah.
He's a great guy.
That's a really cool project.
Yeah.
So again, you start looking at that and you go, well, then why would I be in this one if they do that? And like if Bitcoin Cash comes over and wraps with Cardano, it looks like they're probably going to do something like that.
Yep.
Then you go, well, you have two questions. One, does that give it more utility than Bitcoin? Am I in Bitcoin for utility, or am I just in it because of the branding? Now, if that's the case, then you got to ask yourself, if you own Bcash, should I even be in Bcash if they're wrapped in this other asset? Should I just go straight to the source? So I think there's going to be a bottom-up collapse in all of these tokens that are leveraging other platforms. Whatever the platforms are that everyone's coming to leverage, there's no use for those other tokens.
Got it. See, I think what we might see is interoperability at the level where you don't know the difference between a wrapped and non-wrapped, right? The interface will just decide like, oh, you have the one on ERC20 or the one on your native network. It's the same thing because I could swap them at any time. And I think we might move into a phase where in order to get the innovation that's happening in other ecosystems, like, oh, Cardano is doing this nifty thing that I want my ecosystem to be able to access, is you create an automated wrap function that's on network so that I could get access to that functionality and then come back to my own ecosystem to get whatever it is that I get from mine. In mine, it's a namespace.
Right.
I created a human readable cryptocurrency address system that in order to have a registration in, you need the native currency. So you can't do that with the wrapped version necessarily. But as long as the swap function is there, then yes, you can. You can do it either manually or we could automate that, right? So as soon as the swap function comes up, then I'll have what I feel is meaningful interoperability with the network. Because there's meaningless. There's like the placeholder token thing. Like, oh yeah, we have a wrapped thing living on another network. Yeah. And it will never interact with my ecosystem whatsoever. It will never do anything meaningful for us. It's just there to draw attention and capital, it seems. There's a lot of that. Like I really, really dislike placeholder tokens. I think they kind of poison the whole industry.
Right.
But if you are actually generating use cases and building IP around the wrapped piece, which we are, right, then I think that's more meaningful interoperability. I think we're talking about not simply saying, yes, we have something on another network, but saying, no, our networks function together so often and so much at the base layer, the protocol layer, that to the end user, if I so desire, they don't even know which one they're on. They just get whatever it is they want. Right?
See, I think the markets will arbitrage that.
Perhaps.
So I think what happens is, like, let's look at Ethereum and Polkadot.
Mhm.
Stupid name, by the way. Gavin Wood, like, what are you thinking, dude?
No, they're not
Spend
branders.
$7 on marketing, right? but if you look at that and you say, okay, Ethereum could come into an interesting situation where they get basically stagnated by not being able to upgrade fast enough.
Yeah, ossification. It's a real danger for any distributed network.
And so let's say they go, you know what, we're going to leverage Polkadot for a while.
Mhm.
Cool, but if you're about to lay down a company on an ERC20 project or an Ethereum-based project, period, and you go, well, if they're leveraging him, I'm just going to go lay down over there. Why would I build all this infrastructure on a platform that's leveraging another platform? These guys might not make it. I mean, there's a legitimate concern that Ethereum might not make it.
But if it became the industry norm, if every platform was leveraging every platform, which I think will move, what we're going to move towards interoperability, it'll just be, any network that's capable of wrapping a token will just wrap all the major tokens and have them moving around fluidly.
To go grab a service or something.
Yeah. So I think if that becomes the norm, then there's no differentiator anymore. There's no like, well, why shouldn't I go use Polkadot? We're like, yeah, but Polkadot's also leveraging 4 or 5 other networks itself and using all this other functionality. I think that's just going to be the shape of this kind of macro economy we build, where these systems are going to be touching each other in so many places that they'll start to blend. They'll start to seem like it's one big meta thing. And I think that's what we're going to arrive at. I think there's going to be a kind of meta consensus built up of all the networks in the world functioning. And I mean, even Christian Kamer has some really interesting ideas around this, where he thinks from that consensus, you could get like a unit of account that isn't even a denomination. It's just like a number. And that's what you're worth.
A value.
Yeah, just like not like it's not in Bitcoin or US dollars. It's just like a meta score that you have, and that represents your access to resource, essentially. And I could see that world. I could see it. I don't necessarily agree with it entirely. I think at least during our lifetimes, we're going to see a multiplicity so grand. It's going to be like every company that has a website will have its own cryptocurrency, essentially. I think we're going to see this really big push. And for the end user, that won't really matter as long as we've built the user interfaces in such a way to manage that complexity, right? Like, yeah, I have 99 different ERC20 tokens from these different reward programs that I'm a part of, but I just know that it's worth this. And with the push of a button, I could access that.
Well, and that's the thing, is establishing what this is.
Yeah.
Right. What that main value in the placeholder is.
Yeah. Which right now everyone says US dollars. Christian thinks US dollars. I think more likely a non-national digital money on a long enough timeline will supplant national money as like an idea, just as a concept. Whether or not we'll live long enough to see that, that's the debate, right?
I'm guessing you probably run them both. So I don't know if you're familiar with Jeff Snyder. He's kind of the Fed whisperer.
Got it.
So he's the head of research at Alhambra Investments. And he and I and Emil Kalinowski, we go back and forth because I keep pushing this idea that I think the Chinese digital asset, their DCEP, is going, obviously it forces the US into the game. But here's the weird part. So when the Fed goes from dealing with member banks or prime brokers, which is how they affect policy, which is why policy doesn't get affected. But when they circumvent the banks and go directly to us with the digital dollar, so we're going to have Fed wallets. That's coming in the next 18 to 36 months.
Digital central bank digital currencies, right?
DCEPs,
like,
right? Yeah.
So it's like the talk of the town, just like like half a market cycle ago, which might as well be 10 years ago in this industry. But yeah.
But the Fed is working actively towards a digital wallet that we will all have, and we will do direct banking with the Fed, meaning your local provincial bank, you're all the way up to even the prime brokers, the 24 prime brokers that service the Fed.
Cutting out all the middlemen.
They're all gone, or at least they're inoculated. And so at that point you go, all right, well, if the Fed's dealing directly with me, I become a prime broker, right?
So having access to the Fed banking
which means that's the moment where base money becomes broad money. And that's the problem. That's a disconnect right now. And so
there's some efficiency loss there in that translation.
Huge efficiency. It's like 1 in 10.
Got it.
So, base money doesn't, you can't buy burgers with base money, right? The Fed can lend, not spend.
Yeah.
And they expect central banks to do their bidding. And this is the problem, is that they don't. The shadow banking system is what's basically creates credit creation and creates currency and all these kinds of things. And when it swells, when you and I are bad Americans by paying off debt, by not taking on, predatory
It's not in
debt,
our best interest to pay off debt usually, right?
And but if we do that, we're bad Americans. Compared to like women with like 54 cats and like an online dating profile.
Businesses with massive amounts of debt that topple over and drag the whole economy with it.
But that's actually America, because unfortunately there's been this twist in psychology where bad and profligate and zombie behavior is welcomed,
Mhm.
and paying off debt and unwinding, because that craters GDP.
Yeah.
So when it used to be GNP, you had a different game, but now it's GDP. So
Which I think is a terrible metric. Gross domestic product as a metric for
it
human
means
existence,
nothing.
it's nothing. It means
It means
some
nothing.
big business somewhere did a little bit more activity than it normally would have did, but the rest of the population, there's no meaningful information from that.
And what's the biggest contributor to GDP? Government spending. Well, that's arbitrary as shit, because they just change it every 3 seconds.
Yeah, and that's probably why they like it, because then they could manufacture GDP at a whim.
That's right.
So
But
it's another way of cooking the books.
People are wising up.
Mhm.
And so, but what you have is the Fed is still not, remember, the Fed is no more federal than Federal Express or Federal Burgers.
It's a private institution.
It's a private institution. It's 12 banks. They have a private list of investors, which you know some of, and you don't, Citi and Chase and Deutsche Bank, HSBC, by the way, which is
very scary stuff.
Awful banks. But at the end of the day, if the Fed could do business directly with us, then you would go from having 24 prime banks that don't do anything as far as the Fed is concerned and inhibit monetary policy to direct stimulation of the economy in real time. So let's say they go, listen, we want to get the car market going, so we're going to push out some digital dollars. However,
you have to spend it on the
you got to spend it by the 29th, and you have to spend it on a new car, and it's got to be American.
Got it. Yeah. Programmable money is...
And then gone. Right? You didn't spend it, you lost it. And so what that's going to do is send droves of people around to essentially inflate, deflate, and manage.
It's a bottoms-up economic model. It's a bottoms-up economic model. If they go that route, I'll be really happy. I just really doubt they'll be able to manage it properly. I think there's these kinds of things, when you have them under human control, like money supply.
Oh, humans are awful.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not a knock against them, right? It's not saying, oh, these group of people are bad. It's human beings are inherently flawed. And if you give someone access or unfettered access to the money supply in any way, they're going to gain that. They can't help it. Right?
Well, and I think they are well-intentioned idiots.
Hmm.
I think most of the people we have running money these days, well, that's not fair to say. Most of the people on the government side that manage monetary and fiscal policy grew up, they watch black and white television.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a fucking clue what's going on right now. They're so lost.
That's the other thing I have to constantly wrestle with in our industry, is that I have to explain to people that they were born in a different age than me. I was born in the information age. I'm as old as you can be and be a child of the information. I'm right on the cusp. I'm the elder brother of the group, right? They're all supposed to be like me when we grow up. And when I'm talking to people who are born in like the atomic age and really are products of the first, maybe in second industrial revolution, and we start talking to them about some of the concepts in the industry, just the idea of like non-national digital money, about egalitarianism, about fairness, it's like we're speaking different languages. And the bridge is really hard to make, especially considering the amount of information and data and expertise. I need you to understand finance, information technology, game theory, distributed systems,
software.
And I really need you to be comfortable with like clunky interfaces that we're going to throw at you every day, that if you mess up a little bit, you'll lose all your money. So, good luck. And that's the state of our industry right now. And I think we need to bridge those gaps. So I think all those problems I just described are tremendous opportunities. That's why I spend a lot of time building an interface. That's why I spend a lot of time doing economic design to try to get more desirable outcomes than we've gotten so far. But what you're talking about with a central bank, if that's coming direct from the source, that would be wonderful. And I would love to see stimulus spending that actually goes to people. Right. Bottoms up economics, the real deal, not
actual stimulus.
You're not like, oh, let's dump hundreds of millions of dollars on the corn sector or something for a business quarter and see what happens, right? Like, that's not real stimulus, right? That's more engineering your economy to have certain sectors of it that have an unfair advantage. That's all I really see. It's like, how are you going to compete in that market if corn's the only thing that's profitable, right?
Right.
So I really look forward to seeing what the central banks roll out. I'm obviously going to be watching that, but I really think we're going to get to design our own. We're going to come up with our own monetary policy and decide what we want to subsidize. And mostly what I see from the community, just from the global community, is we kind of want to subsidize the same things. We don't want to subsidize war anymore, certainly. We don't want to subsidize oppression. We really do want to subsidize education and healthcare and human wellness and improving quality of living. And so why not engineer our economies to just create those outcomes automatically? Like, why not say like 10% is going towards pollution removal forever, right?
Yeah, my problem with any subsidy is who's in control of it, in which direction it goes, what's that deal flow look like?
The network would have to control it.
The Cantillon effect usually takes place where the people closest, so this is the thing about inflation, right? And stimulus, and it's the people close to the valve when the money comes out.
It's newer.
They soak it out. They spend it pre-inflation. We get it post-inflation.
Yeah, the Cantillon effect.
We've been beat up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing we can really do about that unless you're one of the very few who has access to the faucet.
So that's what I did. I set the faucet to go to people.
Yep.
Like right at the point of money creation. I actually proposed this to a few central banks already, where I was like, look, how about we set up an economy in which you could request whatever budget you want in the unit of account. I don't care. Pick a number. But when you do, we're going to create an equal amount on the other side, and that's going to go to the people. And in most models, the people end up with about $1,200 a month at normal government spending levels.
Some kind of UBI type system?
UBI, but based off of the money supply, the money creation, right? So instead of like taxing anyone, in fact, with this method, you are eliminating taxation as a thing in your country.
Which is silly anyway.
It's unnecessary. It's inefficient. The admin costs alone aren't worth it, right? The paperwork costs more than the money you're making, right? So just stop doing that. And instead, just use the inflation model to fund the whole government. You put in a request to the network. Everyone says, we want to fund these things. The people get to vote. If it's a yes, it's a yes. But when that budget gets created, and all the people are going to vote on the big budget, by the way, because they create a duplicate of that and distribute it to every user in the system. Make sure that every user in the system is in equilibrium with the government. That way you don't get offsides control of your economy from the public sector, right? Like right now, most jobs in the United States are the government, right? Most people work for the government. I don't know if that's a good idea. That seems like monoculture, right?
You know, they used to not count government employees in unemployment rolls, like U3 and U6, because
well, that's a whole other game, right? They game those numbers like crazy. During my lifetime, they changed it so that if you fell off the roll, if you were no longer accepting or receiving unemployment benefits, that meant you were in the labor force. You just ceased to exist in the numbers, and
which means you're no longer unemployed.
Right? Problem solved, right? Yeah. And that's honestly what the eggheads who are cooking these numbers. That's what they're transmitting. That's what they're saying is like, well, we're not counting you because you're not in the workforce. So our unemployment numbers look more like 3% as opposed to like 25 or something. Something that's much more nightmarish if you have boots on the ground out in the world right now.
They statistically underreport a lot of things. Another one is inflation. So they have the CPII now, which is, you know, and that's part of this new tax plan that saves everyone money. But what happens is when you underreport inflation and you have, you know, tax brackets that are pegged to certain, you know, financial numbers, right? 100,000, 152, whatever you do. If you underreport inflation, then people's spending power is going away. Now, in a true inflationary model that's fair, inflation directly tracks wages, right? Wages have to go up with inflation. Otherwise, if inflation goes first, I can't afford the new costs because A, my money's devalued, and B, I'm not getting paid enough to keep up with inflation. So everybody has to get paid, and they never do.
And this is the treadmill going backwards in everyone's lives, by the way. For those of you listening at home, a lot of people they have this sensation that there's a treadmill that they have to run on. And if they stand still for 5 minutes, that their life is somehow going to fall apart and they're not going to be considered a success by their peers and all that stuff. And what you just described is exactly the mechanism that creates that backward momentum where you have to be wildly productive and take grand risks in order to get ahead in life. And that really just shouldn't be the case, right? It really should be like having like a middle class, blue collar life should be very productive and fully self-actualizing. It shouldn't be this thing that you have to struggle through, which is what most Americans deal with. They live lives of quiet desperation, right? There's something like 46% of American households can't raise $400 in emergency cash.
Right.
Where are we going with this, right? Where's this great prosperity we were talking about? During the first and second industrial revolution, they promised our parents and our grandparents that if they worked really hard, future generations wouldn't have to work as hard, that our work weeks would get shorter and our productivity would be higher. Well, productivity is way up, right? We're doing good in terms of productivity. Wages way down, right? People working longer hours.
Well, they haven't tracked the money supply. Yeah. And so when wages don't track money supply, your spending power is reduced because there's more dollars chasing the same stuff. So things get less affordable and your savings essentially dwindle because the buying power is reduced. Like I always laugh when people are like, my house went up in 20 years, it doubled in value. I'm like, no, dummy, because aggregate inflation is 8%. Every 9 years, it got chopped in half. Your house should be worth 4 times as much. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, go buy some eggs.
It's kind of like if you thought of the United States as a corporation and the US dollar as its stock. It'd be like you had a special stockholder that was just multiplying the amount of stock out in the supply and keeping it for themselves, right? And saying like, I these are mine and my buddies, and the rest of you, you're losing a say or any power in the organization of the United States, right? And that's just the world we've been living in our whole lives, where our portion of control, our portion of sort of representation in the government and the economy has just been shrinking as both as individuals and just as a population overall. And obviously everyone talks about that. That's a hot button issue, right? We're pretty much one button push away from eating the rich, it seems like. And I don't think that's healthy for anyone, right? I don't think that creates good outcomes in any economy. But what I really think we need to do are create systems that offer the opportunity for people to self-actualize or have like a standard of living that is tolerable, to create the opportunity for everyone to sort of step out into that rarefied air that guys like Elon Musk and whoever, whatever your idea of success is. We just need to create the proper soil to allow for that. And anytime we don't do that, literally every human being that we fail to self-actualize, I think is a net loss to humanity. And it's just also just a tragedy, right? So why are we doing this? We lose 9 million people a year to hunger and hunger-related disease. It's 2020. When we were growing up, like I'm a futurist, right? I was reading all the futurist content and really looking at what people in the past, like in the 40s and 50s, thought we'd be living in 2020, and we're way off the mark, right? We got some electric cars and stuff, but people are still starving in the streets. I still see shanty towns every time I drive through a major city. I've been in one major city in my entire life where I didn't see a homeless person. That was Seoul. Thank you, John. That was the only city I didn't see any homeless people was there. But like, we're supposed to be living in the future right now, right? When is this egalitarian utopia going to appear on the horizon? And I think we have to build it. I think we're not going to get it from the government. We're not going to get it even from our traditional private sector, like big corporation. Facebook's not going to turn around and say, hey, everyone, we're going to give you a share and it's going to be significant. Like, it's just not going to happen. But what if we built those kinds of environments? What if we built the user interface and the networks and the sort of ecosystem in which all of our activity was driving this kind of thing?
Yeah.
Like that's my vision. That's Anatha's vision.
So that gets back to the idea of having competing private currencies. So I don't think you do away with governmental currencies. I don't think that's a real. That's not. That's.
But
not
they'll run simultaneously. Right? It's a competitive market. I always say digital money or money is a product now, and that product is going to be a competitive marketplace, like a really competitive marketplace.
And I think you just set them. Again, to Jeff. Jeff and I talk a lot, and it's you set them against each other, and you say let the best currency win.
Fight for your inputs.
And good money will hide on the side. People will spend bad money. That's been traditionally.
What's the name of that law again? That's there's a name for that. That good money will flush out bad money. Oh God,
it's a principle or
yeah. I always love those things like Metcalfe's law and all those things. But I know what you're talking about.
But good money
Godwin's
always.
law. Maybe no. That's when you call someone a Nazi eventually.
Well, given long enough. So
we'll get there.
But yeah, so it's kind of one of those things where I think if you set these currencies, let them compete, you're going to see people do what's in their best interest. Self-maximalization, and in that you will see what is best for everyone's self-interest.
Yeah, the trick is to engineer that so that as that person is pursuing their self-interest, or like expressing their wherewithal and their self-actualization, that their own glory, their own personal glory fuels this engine, which is helping everyone, right? And in the right environment, as long as the inflation and distribution policy is geared right, that would be absolutely true. I can make it so that every business transaction in an ecosystem like that is helping to solve poverty, essentially. So where instead of taking a transaction fee and sticking it in my pocket as profit, we're going to turn it around and point it at the end user.
It's kind of altruistic inflation.
Yeah, or it's just what I considered as like a natural cycle in and out, right? Like the user's creating inputs, right? They're doing the transaction fees, they're doing the registrations and using the services that are creating economic activity. They're doing swaps and creating margins and all that stuff, that wonderful plethora of things you see in the economy. Well, that's their activity. Shouldn't they get a share of it, right? So if you build an economy in which the native currency is being powered by all that, but the inflation and distribution of the economy is pointing back at the people that are doing that, well, you should get into a positive feedback loop, right? It's behaviorism 101. It's you've taken an action. I've given you an immediate reward. Immediacy is very important. You're certain it's going to come, and you know exactly what it's worth when it arrives. Now, every time you take actions which create these functions, which like create economic activity, I'm rewarding you along the way. And it's in your best interest to keep going because I'm rewarding. Oh, like fill out your full profile. Thank you for giving me all your private information. Thing rewarded, right? Things like that. Things that normally we'd be a little reluctant to do, perhaps even. Fill out this survey, right? Sure. Your information is going to be private. It's going to be controlled by you. But if someone wanted to access it, now it's all there and you can monetize it.
Right.
But what I've done is take all of that. Anything that the network does goes into the master contract. And that master contract is the crux of what I call an economic torus, because whatever you say is in the master contract is ultimately going to be the outcome you get in the economy. If we say all the money goes to one thing, you're going to get a lot of that one thing. And what I've done is I split it up. I have half of it go to the end users. 25% goes into a development fund. which will be controlled by the network, and they could vote on initiatives. And the 25% of the inflation that's going into this development fund will fund future community efforts. Essentially, they get to vote on what the money's spent on. Then the other 25% goes for anyone holding IP in the company. Right? So when you deploy, I created what I call a trustless dividend system, that all the economic activity gets pulled the same way it gets pulled for everyone else. But if you're one of the people that own the IP, if you're part of the organizations that have the licensing for these systems I'm deploying, well, you get a percentage in real time. I call it a trustless dividend system. It's like you're getting the reward with no intermediary.
Royalties.
It's hard to frame it because nothing like this ever really existed, because it's not currency and it's not stock, but it has some properties which allow you to do certain things. It's a programmable unit of account. Cool. And if you do it in such a way where you get desirable outcomes, where like, the people who took the big risk, who spent money and went out there before a single dime was made by the network or any organization associated with it, well, they deserve to be considered, right? I try to have some consideration for all parties involved in an economy. That's kind of at the root of our thinking. That's why my company's named after someone called Anatha Pindika. And that's what he did for business. He just said, okay, let's make it useful for everyone. Let's make sure that everyone benefits, everyone profits, everyone is happier because this thing exists. And that's what I've tried to create in my environment. And I think we've mostly succeeded, but we're going to find out real soon. We're going to put it out in market, let people play with it. I think we're going to have about a year of soft launch, we're calling it, where
you need to let people try to break it and game it and see
which has been happening. And since we built in the Cosmos ecosystem, like that, whatever you could say about Cosmos, you could mostly say about us aside from the economic design. Also Tendermint, since we're secured by Tendermint. So a lot of the stuff we're using is just like off the shelf, right? And I think that's the whole point of the open source community. I'm not trying to get you to agree that my protocol is good or that my DApp platform. This is a really important realization. I have to keep saying this to like VCs and guys who are from the old guard, is in an open source environment, having a technological advantage is meaningless because everyone will simply migrate to whatever's best in class. Sure. If you create something new tomorrow and it's really, really better than what I'm using, I'm just going to migrate my ledger over and move my interface to talk to that, right? So no one is going to be 10 times better than someone else. This is the number we're. But what you can do is execute in such a way where you get desirable outcomes, where you get self-propagating mechanisms, where users are actually doing the work for you and going out and getting other users, where you have auto affiliate systems, referral programs. I built all of this, by the way. When you could get to that level and have a tool that it's all meaningless if it's not useful, right? And I think that's really the state we're at with our industry right now, is most of the instruments are speculative instruments that don't drive real utility yet. But we're getting there. Right. And I'm seeing some exciting stuff. I mean, the market's heating up. I'm going to ask you one last time because we're going to run out of time.
Sure.
What's your favorite project today?
Still going to be Cardano with a close second, Filecoin.
Filecoin. Great. Those are two like darlings of the industry, right?
And I was early in Filecoin. I was one of the, been waiting.
Right.
So I know. We'll see.
Well, that's the thing with a lot of these projects like Telegram or whatever. I think they get in trouble where they have like a sale and they're taking in money and then they didn't launch, like put the thing out.
Well, the SEC shut them down on the 11th hour.
Yeah, and they also said that, hey, we're a security, fill out the form, do the KYC AML, right? Like jump through the hoops, right?
I know at first everybody was like, but if you unpack it, does Telegram need its own sovereign currency? I mean,
no, I think businesses can leverage this technology to unpack value for their organization. And and there's a lot of ways to do that. I think Telegram could have done that. I think Facebook could have done that. But for whatever reason, the people in the design room, whoever they had leading the project, I don't think they either could get the outcomes they wanted because the organization is just too big and cantankerous, or they just didn't lack the industry-specific expertise necessary to navigate it. I think a lot of guys who work in information science, like the big data guys, I think they look at cryptocurrency and think it's less complicated than what they do. And I think they're sadly wildly mistaken, right? It could not because of the technology side, but because of also the interface with the regulatory structures and the existing financial system. Like finance is immensely complicated. And what we're saying is we're going to make information age version of that. And disrupting that will be big and I think wildly beneficial for everyone, but it's also really complicated. And you get a company like Facebook who is very successful at what they do. I don't think they would be very successful in the cryptocurrency industry. I don't think they have the right culture, the right leadership, and quite frankly, after I read the white paper, the industry-specific expertise necessary to succeed with Libra. Maybe it'll change, but in the first 14 pages of the white paper, there was already incongruencies where they're saying they're going to bank the unbanked, but you require KYC AML. It's like, where are you going with this, right?
Yeah, it was all smoke and mirrors.
But on the good news, we have Cardano and Filecoin, right? We have good things coming, right?
Economies basically are debt, assets, and confidence. If you don't have all three, you fail. And in the crypto space, it's use, utility, and adoption. And if you don't have all three, you fail. That's it. I mean, it can kind of be reduced to 6 words.
I mean, that's a fair enough model for me, right? And I don't think we've driven adoption as an industry, not as any single, I don't think any single organization is really responsible for adoption. I think we as an industry have to take that on. And I think whoever takes that on meaningfully and directly will end up being the market leader in the future. Sure. I think that's really what we're missing. We're missing also just strong leadership. I think we talked about the ICO issue. Yep. It's like, oh, you're 27 years old and you have $125 million, but you have no purpose in life. Right. Like you're not on fire to solve problems.
Yeah.
Like
good luck with the upgrades.
Yeah. Have fun with the Lambo, right? Like, like that's really what we've done. And, that's why I talk about ethos-led ecosystems, I think, being really important because they allow, for leadership or communities to emerge that have real purpose, that have some kind of meat behind them. I want to solve poverty. I want to self-actualize every human being on the planet, right? What's your project supposed to do? Right? And we see these platforms, like in Cardano is one of them, and Ethereum was another, where it's like, oh, well, we built this thing so you could build the thing. That was the big joke. Like, look, we built the thing, and look at all the wonderful things you could build with it. We're not going to build any of them, but look at all the wonderful things you could build with it now, and now you go out and do it. And my argument was like, you're the one with the hundreds of millions of dollars. Why aren't you financing internal projects to do everything you just described that is possible on your platform? Why would you leave that up for grabs, right? If it really is as big an opportunity as you say to build in the Ethereum or Cardano ecosystems, why aren't all these things being built? And I think in some cases they are, right? But mostly we haven't seen that. Mostly we've seen ecosystems that just seem hollow, right? Where's the beautiful interface? Where's the meaningful interactions? Where's the actual utility? Right?
We're just still on that foundation level, I think.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I always just like to think of it that we're in the prototype phase. We're at Friendster. If it's social media, we're kind of at Friendster, and it's like, okay, well, it works, but I get the premise.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, it's not scaling right. But all right, well, this has been wonderful, Nicholas. I hope you come back. I think we're out of time, right? He was giving me how much time we have. 4 minutes. Okay. Well, we'll do some closing comments, but this has been really wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for coming on. I hope to have you back sometime. If there's anything you ever want to talk about, or if there's a topic that comes up that you just want to share, let me know. The good news is we spend a lot of money on marketing, so whatever you say, we're gonna shove it in front of people's faces. Here, listen to what this guy has to say. So there's some advantage to meeting here, and it's awesome that you're in LA. So it's always nice to have another crypto guy nearby.
Yeah, I as far as my kind of media presence thing, it's pretty simple. I don't take any money. I don't monetize anything.
It's just information.
And I tell people to go fuck themselves when they do stupid stuff. Period.
And that's all we really need. At the end of the day, we need these agents out there who are offering their perspective. You have a unique background and a unique set of specialty in terms of finance and precious metals that we don't have. Most people don't have that knowledge or that information. So thank you so much for sharing it. I'm going to continue to watch your show and listen in.
Yeah. I by the way, you ought to come on as a guest. I'd love to have you talk to my little cadre and explain kind of what you guys are doing.
I will take any opportunity I can to bang the bell. I mean, they kind of wear me out with it. They make me talk to a lot of people, but it is my life's purpose. It's what I'm built for. It's what I'm here for. So if you have some people that want to hear out anything I'm working on or anything that's going on, just say the word.
Yeah, well, come check us out.
Crypto
and Coffee.
Yeah, I would love to be on Crypto and Coffee. So just let me know when, and I'll swing by.
For sure. We have a meal coming on Monday, Emil Kalinowski.
Very cool.
From Eurodollar University.
Very cool.
So that'll be cool. And then I'm working a deal with Real Vision right now. We're still in the early stages. And then I do the bullpen twice a week for Raging Bull Investing.
Very cool. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll be sure to check all of them out. And I hope everyone else who's listening does as well. Stay in touch. And
for sure.
Aloha, brother.
Yeah, thank you.